You can inherit a house, a watch, a name, but can you inherit a title that was never truly given? And more importantly, should you? The British monarchy has always existed in that strange space between myth and law, where symbolism bleeds into constitution and where inheritance is both a birthright and a battlefield. But what just happened inside a closed parliamentary session in London didn't feel like tradition. It didn't even feel like protocol. It felt like reckoning. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This is the story of a child, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, born into a royal title that was never officially his, raised under the blazing scrutiny of two worlds, one of royal lineage and one of global celebrity. A boy who, in the eyes of the public, was the future Duke of Sussex. Until now. Because just days ago, with little fanfare and almost no mainstream press coverage, the UK Parliament made a quiet but profound declaration. Archie will not inherit the Sussex title. Not now. Not ever. Why? Well, that's the question, isn't it? On paper, the ruling is simple, clear, clean. A technical clarification of succession protocols related to peerage titles and their inheritance. But behind closed doors, according to sources we've been following for months, the real reason is far murkier and far more disturbing. Because according to one confidential briefing from a parliamentary advisor, the title of Sussex wasn't withheld from Archie. It was revoked, and not because of anything he did, but because of what his mother did with it. Let that settle in for a second. This isn't a story about a child being denied a title. It's a story about a title being turned into a tool, a brand, a currency, and when that tool began to be used. Not in service of the crown, but in service of something else entirely, the system buckled. But we need to be precise here. This isn't about palace drama. It's not about tabloid speculation or ideological bias. This is about a series of documents, dates, legal filings, trademarks, bank transfers, and carefully orchestrated branding maneuvers. Moves that may have permanently reshaped the monarchy's relationship with modern identity, with commercial interest, and with its own bloodline. Ask yourself, if someone turns a royal title into a trademark, does it still belong to the crown? Or has it become something else? This question, the quiet one that nobody wanted to say out loud, is now at the heart of a much larger institutional fracture. One that has members of parliament asking, in closed meetings, whether the peerage system itself can survive the age of influencer royalty. We've been following the paper trail, and it's not just about the Sussex title. Because once Parliament opened that door, other things started to emerge. Hidden communications, foreign accounts, leaked strategy decks, a registered proposal for a children's lifestyle brand under the name Archie Sussex, a heated dispute behind the walls of Kensington Palace, and a deposition from someone no one expected. So yes, Archie won't inherit Sussex. That's the headline. But the real story is why, and why now. There's something deeper unraveling beneath this announcement. Something that raises uncomfortable questions not just about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, but about the monarchy itself. About the way we view lineage, identity, legacy, and the tension between public image and private strategy. Because what happens when royalty stops being symbolic and starts being strategic? Let's step back for a moment. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped back from royal duties in 2020, the narrative was clear. They wanted freedom, independence, privacy, the ability to raise their children away from the rigidity of the royal machine. And to some extent, they did just that. They moved to California. They signed production deals. They launched Archewell. They spoke candidly about mental health, about race, about the press. But something strange began to happen in the background. While publicly disengaging from royal life, the Sussexes, particularly Meghan, began building something. Something big. Something branded. It started with the Sussex Royal website. Then came the trademark filings. Then came the brand positioning documents, found in a leak that barely got media traction at the time. And then came the quiet registration of multiple LLCs, each connected, in some way, to the name Sussex. To the public, Sussex was a title. To the back end of those filings, it was a launchpad. And in those filings, Archie's name appeared. Not as a child, not as a symbol, but as a potential asset. It's difficult to talk about a child in these terms. It feels cold, even cruel. But this is exactly what sparked the Parliament's intervention. Because at the heart of the peerage system lies a delicate balance between symbolism and service. Titles like Duke or Duchess aren't just decorations. They imply responsibility, stewardship, a connection to the institution itself. And when that connection is seen as compromised, whether legally or ethically, the crown must respond. Quietly, if it can. Forcefully, if it must. So what exactly did Meghan Markle do that triggered this verdict? Was it a technical violation of peerage protocol? Was it a matter of optics, public perception turning sour? Or was it something deeper? A confidential letter, sent from a royal aide to a senior member of parliament, cited strategic misrepresentation of the Sussex title for private, non-sovereign gain. The aide's language was careful, but unmistakable. The title had become, in their words, a mechanism of leverage rather than a symbol of duty. Those words rattled insiders. Because if they're true, if a royal title can be shaped into a vehicle for influence, investment, and brand building, what separates royalty from celebrity? And if that line disappears, what happens next? That's the question Parliament was forced to confront. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The moment Archie's name began appearing in proposal decks sent to global venture firms and licensing agents, some tied to entertainment, others to children's products, the conversation shifted. Suddenly, this wasn't about protecting a child. It was about protecting the institution. And not everyone inside the palace agreed. We'll get to that part soon. How the internal royal family fractured behind the scenes over this. How Prince William reportedly confronted Harry over a single line in one of Meghan's investor memos. And how a figure from Diana's past, someone you'll recognize, broke years of silence to weigh in on what this really means for the next generation. But before we go there, we have to understand what the title Sussex represents, and why, in the eyes of Parliament, it had to be protected, even at the cost of a child's inheritance. Because the decision wasn't made lightly. It came after months of briefings, after security agencies flagged certain offshore financial patterns, after a confidential MI5 report described foreign interest in Sussex-linked ventures, and after internal Crown lawyers reviewed Meghan's personal business dealings and found something serious enough that, when brought before the Privy Council, led to the ruling, the title shall not pass to the heir. But what exactly did they find? What deal? What paper trail? What clause? And how much of this did Harry know? That's where this story turns. Because it wasn't just Meghan's actions that raised alarm. It was Harry's silence, his absence, his compliance. And when he finally did speak, behind a closed phone call with Prince William, those words were recorded. And they would blow the lid off everything. But first, to understand how we got here, we need to go back. Not far, just a few years. To the moment Archie was born, and what was and wasn't said about his title. Because the Real story begins not with Parliament's ruling, but with a single line on Archie's birth certificate. A line that, until now, almost everyone overlooked. What it said, and what it didn't, would come to redefine the meaning of inheritance itself. What does it mean when something's left blank on a birth certificate? Is it just an oversight? A bureaucratic delay? Or is it deliberate? Because when Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born, much of the world expected fanfare. A royal title, a procession of tradition. But what arrived instead was silence. There was no grand christening in a public chapel, no official confirmation of his HRH styling, and most importantly, no mention of the word prince. Some chalked it up to modernity, a couple choosing privacy, breaking the mold. But behind the scenes, a few royal watchers noticed something else, something oddly specific. In the original registration document filed with the General Register Office, there was a conspicuous absence. Under the section where one might expect formal royal titles to be acknowledged, there was none. Instead, Meghan was listed as Rachel Meghan Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Harry as His Royal Highness Henry Charles Albert David Duke of Sussex. And Archie, just Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. No styling, no title, no hereditary reference. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because titles, in the royal system, don't automatically transfer just because someone is born into a certain family. They're governed by letters patent, royal decrees that define who gets what and when. Under the current system, only male line grandchildren of the monarch are automatically entitled to princely status. At the time of Archie's birth, Queen Elizabeth was still on the throne. Harry, as the son of Charles, qualified. But Archie, as a great-grandchild, did not. That's the technicality. But here's where the contradiction surfaces. There was nothing stopping the Queen from issuing new letters patent, granting Archie the title of prince, or at least designating him with honorary styling. She'd done it before. She did it for William's children, even for Charlotte. So why not Archie? Was it racism, as some suggested? Favoritism? A quiet snub? Or was it something else? Let's consider the timing. Archie was born in May of 2019. By June, Harry and Meghan were already laying the groundwork to split from the royal foundation. By August, domain names and branding prototypes for Sussex Royal were being registered in Meghan's business manager's name. And by September, a controversial set of filings, related to trademark rights across dozens of international markets, appeared in legal databases connected to the Duke and Duchess. It was fast, coordinated, strategic, which begs a question. Was the absence of Archie's title on that certificate a passive omission or a protective maneuver? Because if Meghan and Harry knew, even then, that they would build something independent, something separate, then tying Archie officially to the monarchy could have complicated that. It's easier to use a title as leverage if it isn't legally cemented. Easier to deny royal obligations if the paperwork remains ambiguous. And easier to shift narratives later if the initial ones are left open-ended. But that ambiguity? It didn't go unnoticed. Inside the palace, according to a senior aide who later briefed a parliamentary ethics committee, there were early concerns that the Sussexes were intentionally keeping Archie outside of formal royal designation, while still implying royal legitimacy for branding purposes. The phrase they used was selective sovereignty. In public, they'd say he didn't need a title. In private business plans, they referred to the Sussex heir. The contradiction was subtle, but for a monarchy that lives and dies on symbolism and clarity, it was destabilizing. One moment that particularly raised eyebrows came later that year, during an interview Meghan gave while on tour in South Africa. She spoke candidly, emotionally. She described motherhood, the pressure, the scrutiny, and then, quietly, she said something strange. We're just trying to raise our son in a way that gives him a fair start in life, without all the weight of expectations. But here's the problem. While those words were playing on every major news channel, Meghan's legal team was in active negotiation with at least 3 international firms, discussing licensing deals tied to a Sussex-branded children's initiative. One of those brands included a stylized cartoon character named Little Archie of Sussex. The character had a crown. Sources who reviewed the pitch deck described it as charming, polished, and deeply confusing from a constitutional standpoint, because it was unclear, was this a fictional character, or was it Archie? When Parliament got wind of this, they didn't act immediately. These things take time. There are processes, reviews, consultations, but a few backbench MPs began asking quiet questions. Who owns the title of Sussex? What happens if it's commercialized? And most pressingly, what legal protections exist to prevent a member of the royal family from turning an inherited title into a private brand? At first, the answers were murky. The laws surrounding peerage and branding are, frankly, old, outdated. They weren't built for Netflix deals or Instagram rollouts. They were designed in the era of horses and heraldry. But something about this case, something about the way the Sussex title was being repurposed, felt like a test, a boundary being pushed. And when you push a boundary in the monarchy, especially one tied to inheritance, Parliament takes notice. Not immediately, not loudly, but structurally, subtly. A subcommittee was formed. Informal, at first, mostly composed of legal analysts and parliamentary advisors. Their job wasn't to attack Meghan or Harry. It was to investigate the mechanisms. Can a peerage title be revoked from a descendant? Can Parliament intervene when the crown appears compromised? And, perhaps most controversially, can a child be denied inheritance based on the actions of the parent? That last question, it haunted the room. Because it wasn't just legal. It was moral, ethical, uncomfortable. But as they dug deeper into the documents, into trademark filings, leaked proposals, tax registrations, a pattern began to emerge. Meghan hadn't just used the title of Duchess as a formality. She'd operationalized it. One filing, reviewed by a source close to the investigation, included a phrase that would later appear in a confidential parliamentary summary. Leverage the prestige of inherited titles without compromising independence. It's a tidy phrase, smart, but to certain members of the House of Lords, it was chilling, because it signaled intent. And once intent is proven, everything changes. Which brings us back to that certificate. That blank space. That absence of formal title next to Archie's name. It was a silence that, in hindsight, spoke volumes. And eventually, it forced a decision. Because what happens when the crown no longer controls its own symbols? What happens when the lines between identity and asset are blurred so fully that even a child's name becomes negotiable? Parliament had to answer.